Hi there everybody, Bob Stafford, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. Back in 2021 I did a clinic for the National Convention of the National Model Railroad Association on unit train operations of the Burlington Northern Railroad, basically based on the 1980s and 90s before the Santa Fe merger. I've taken a video clip of that presentation, and I've edited here into this clip here and to share with you all. I was thinking that there would be some interest in this subject. So let's go on and let's go back to 2021 and let's watch this clinic presentation. Many modelers have unit coal trains operating on their layouts. In most cases, these trains just operate across the model railroad from staging to staging, for example, and doing no online work. A unit coal train operates from a single consignor or coal mine, in our case, to a single consignee such as a power plant. In this clinic, we will discuss Burlington Northern coal train operations when I worked on the coal route to Texas. Empty coal trains, such as this empty topping the hill at Engora, Nebraska, 22 miles out of Alliance, came directly into the South Yard at Alliance, Nebraska. Trains arriving from the east came around the Y or used a back connecting track behind a mechanical facility and ran into the South Yard. They pulled into a yard track. The power was cut off by the inbound crew and taken to the diesel service facility. This is an aerial view of the South Yard. The carman next blue flagged the track and inspected the inbound train for defects. This normally took about 1 hour. When the carman finished inspecting the train, they dropped their blue flags, advised the yard master that the flags were down, and gave him a list of bad order cars in the train. The caboose was set over to the caboose track for the carman to service. The caboose was cleaned. The fuel oil tank for the stove filled, paper towels, cups, fuses, torpedoes, and other supplies were replenished. Next, the bad order cars were switched out of the train. All bad order cars were kicked into one of the shorter yard tracks. There were set times during the day when the rip track would be switched. This was normally during shift change at the rip track. The bad order cars would be taken to the rip track for repair. There was a group of several smaller, shorter tracks known as a spare yard. Extra empty coal cars was kept in this yard. Each train symbol had a minimum tender and a maximum tender. This was a form showing the minimum number of coal cars for spotting at the mine for loading. This was determined by the coal tariff. As to the minimum tender of cars that the railroad required for the unit train rate. The maximum tender was the maximum number of cars that would fit on the balloon track at the power plant. Most unit coal trains operated with cars leased by the power plant. Empty coal cars leased by the power plant would be switched out of the spare yard into the train. For example, Houston Power and Light trains used UFIX coal cars. When adding empty coal cars to train in the South Yard, the cars would have to be cut in the proper stripe order. All rotary dump cars have a contrasting color painted on the rotary coupler end of the car. This is referred to as a stripe. All trains are lined up, beginning with the colored stripe on the rotary end of the cars facing towards the locomotive. Near the middle of the train, a double rotary car is placed. This has the rotary couplers on both ends of the car. Beyond the double rotary, the stripes are lined facing towards the caboose. This is a photo of a double rotary car. It has stripes on both ends, and the cars coupled to it, the stripes are facing away from the double rotary car. The coal desk at the Network Operations Center in Fort Worth, Texas, kept track of the movement of the unit coal train sets. When an empty coal train set returned to Alliance for the 35th time, the coal desk notified the terminal train master, who then arranged with the South Yard master to turn the entire inbound train on the Y, for which was located at the west end of the North Yard in Alliance. The Y can be seen in this photo. And I've also marked out the location of the bypass track that the empty coal trains used to get into the South Yard. When an empty train had to be wide, the train was not blue flagged by the carman on arrival. A switch engine would pull the empty train out of the South Yard, turned on the Y, and then return the train back to the South Yard. It was then blue flagged and worked by the carman. On the road incidents. In the days before DP power was placed at the rear end of the train, the drawbar stress of a loaded gold train going up the steep grade was very intense. Any knuckle or drawbar with a defect within the first 30 cars of the train would fail. Most knuckle and drawbar failures happen within the first 10 cars in the train. On the Twin Mountain subdivision, former Colorado Southern Division, at milepost 261, the grade increased for a short distance to 1.8%. And this location was known as Drawbar Alley. The right-of-way was littered with knuckles and drawbars at this location. About once a year, the little giant high rail crane would be sent out with electromagnet to pick up scrap and load it into a gondola car. When the train broke in two, the headman walked back first to see if it was a knuckle or a drawbar. If it was a drawbar that pulled out of the rear end of the car, the head end went to the next spur track and the car was set out with the headman riding the car. If it was a drawbar that pulled out of the wrong end of the car, it would need to be chained up to the head end of the train and taken to the next spur track where it could be set out. The chain or drawbar strap and any tools needed were taken off the engine and put beside it. The rear of the train was pulled up to the chain or drawbar strap and tools. They were put on the rear of the car. Then the brakeman took it back to the rear of the train. He chained up the car and would ride it on a brake wheel end to the set out track, just in case the chain broke if the car had no air in it. Otherwise, it would roll downhill and crash into the train unless handbrakes were set. If he was able to couple the air between the two cars after they were chained together, then he would ride the car not on the rear end. And if the train got a knuckle, the headman would close the angle cock, walk back to the engine, get a knuckle off the engine, drop it, the tools needed on the ground beside the engine, have the engineer pull the head end forward until the rear car was at where he had dropped a knuckle. The knuckle and tools would be put on the head end of the car, and then the head end would shove back to where the brake was. If it was a knuckle, it was replaced and the train was put back together. Now came the hard part, restarting the train on a grade without getting another knuckle or drawbar. The railroad was normally tied up for at least 2 hours or more by a coal train breaking in two, providing they didn't have trouble restarting the train. When the car department road truck repaired the car, it would be picked up in a freight train and moved to a central location where the repaired coal cars were put back into the unit coal trains. One of these locations was Amarillo, Texas. At Eastern Street, there was a couple of tracks that held a coal train and a couple of short spur tracks. Loaded and empty coal trains received their 1,000-mile inspections here. The inbound coal train was blue flagged and worked by the carman. Any bad order cars are set out on one of the spur tracks. In another spur track, repaired loaded coal cars were kept. Bad order cars were replaced with repair coal loads in proper stripe orientation. Now, how can we do these things on our model railroad? Well, the first thing we have to look at in review for a model railroad operation, if you're running a unit coal train with a caboose or DP power, is that the train has a double rotary car in concept with stripes lined away from it towards the engine and the caboose or DP power. If you're modeling a yard on your layout that represents a division crew change point, designated as a 500-mile inspection point prior to 1982, or a 1,000-mile inspection point 1982 and beyond. When a train arrives at your yard, put it into a siding for the carman to work. This takes about 1 hour. After 1 hour on your fast clock, the blue flags are dropped. Devise a method to locate bad order cars in the train, such as dice, situation cards, computer random generator program, whatever works best for you. Have the yard crew use the road power to set out the bad order cars and put replacement, repaired loads that have been switched off the rep track into the train in proper stripe order. Set out cars will then be set to the rip track the next time that it is switched by one of your yard engines. Unit coal trains set out bad order cars with a mechanical defect in a spur track on your model railroad. The next operation session, you put out a work order to your local freight crew to pick up the car and return it to the yard. If you model division point where unit coal train inspection is being done, the car can be added to the train here. If you are modeling a small support yard, the coal load would be added to the next freight train going in the proper direction, picking up cars from your yard. Another spin on this idea would be between operating sessions to stage a loaded unit coal car train on a spur track for your local to pick up and handle it accordingly. Another scenario would be a freight train comes out of the staging yard with loaded coal train car in the set out block for your yard that performs the FRA inspection on your unit coal trains. Car is switched out with other repair coal loads and added to the next unit coal train that is inspected. These are a few ideas that you can use to add additional operation to your model railroad. I would like to thank George Workma, Carl Rethwish, Brian Ambrose, and Greg Wyrick for permission to use their photos. I hope I have given you some new ideas to incorporate into your model railroad for additional operating opportunities.